This is Snuggle in Storytime. I am reading the last of the Really Great Whangdoodles, written by Julie Andrews Edwards, and I have permission through HarperCollins Publishers to read this out loud. We are now on part 2, called Capture. This is chapter 1. As each day passed, the children's ability to look, listen, feel, taste, and smell improved immeasurably. The professor taught them the wonders of music, not only instrumental music, but the music of running water, the sighing of the wind, the hum of the city, and the song of the birds. Lindy was by far the best pupil. Her imagination was so vivid and her senses so aware that she easily pulled ahead. The professor knew that she was already capable of making the journey to Whangdoodleland, but the decision to go had to be delayed because the boys, they just were not ready. Tom was doing well, but Ben was having difficulties. For the first time in his life, he discovered that being the eldest did not make him the most competent. Being 13 years of age, he had more to question and more to doubt. He had to fight logic and his own stubborn opinions of things. Mrs. Potter asked Lindy one day, "So what on earth do you find to do over there all the time?"
"Oh, we play and we have tea and the professor teaches us."
Lindy's voice was deceptively casual. "Well, what does he teach you?"
"Oh, he talks about life and stuff like that. And we look through the microscope. We go for walks and rides. It's just great fun."
Mrs. Potter changed the subject. "Well, Daddy and I are going to see Grandma this Saturday, and we'd love to take you with us, especially since it's your holiday next week. But Grandma just isn't well enough, and we'll be back a week from Sunday. And in the meantime, I've arranged for Ethel to stay with you."
"But what if the professor asks us out?"
Lindy wanted to know. "Well, that's all right. I'll just tell Ethel that you'll probably be spending a great deal of time with him. Then she won't worry about you." When the children visited the professor the next day, Lindy told him about her parents' plans. He looked thoughtful, and then he made a startling announcement. "I think that the time has come to start a new phase of your lessons. I think you are ready to try the sympathetic hats."
"Sympathetic hats?"
said Tom. "Actually, I call them scrappy caps," said the professor with a smile. "A scrappy cap is a covering worn on your head, which is sympathetic to the brain's impulses and desires." "Do they have to have some special power or something?" asked Ben. "Oh, I would say that there is something very magical about scrappy caps," replied the professor. "Let me show them to you right now." And he left the children, and the moment later returned carrying 3 brightly colored objects. "These hats are your passports to success. In spite of all of our hard work, I doubt that you'd come close to seeing the Whangdoodle unless you were wearing one of these. Once we begin the great adventure, you may not, indeed you must not, ever remove them from your heads. Not only will they help us get to Whangdoodleland, but most importantly, without them, we will not be able to find our way home." The professor held up an exquisite bonnet made of white lace and linen and brilliant red chintz. "Lindy, this is your hat. It comes from the Netherlands. The underlining is made of the finest linen. And see how red topping is covered with meadow flowers and hens and roosters and rabbits."
"Oh, it's so lovely,"
said Lindy. "Hold it carefully, but don't put it on your head yet," cautioned the professor. "Tom, this is yours." And he held out a bright blue felt cap that resembled a funnel with the cloth pipe pointed backwards. "It comes from Madeira. The purpose of this little pipe was to hold a sprig of rosemary, which gave the wearer the benefits of magical powers. Did you know that in ancient Greece, students wore rosemary twined in their hair while studying for their exams? It is supposed to strengthen memory, and it is thought to bring success to any undertaking." Tom took the hat and held it very carefully. The professor handed Ben an Indian headband with a small tassel hanging from it. "Ben, yours comes from Guatemala. It was made by the Mayas. They were highly skillful people who were able to record history by means of picture writing. You can see some of it on the band. Notice how it is actually one long piece, which has been wound around 13 times, and that the coils have been sewn together to keep their shape. 13 was considered a magic number." The professor looked at the children and smiled. "You will discover that your sympathetic hats make all the difference. Once they are upon your heads, you will experience a great feeling of exhilaration. So tomorrow, we will begin our practice wearing them." Lindy walked eagerly home from school the next day, happily contemplating the midterm holiday and the time she had with her brothers to spend with the professor. She was desperately eager to begin the new lessons with the scrappy caps. She had a feeling that something wonderful was going to happen, and she began to sing.
I've got a pretty hat to wear upon my head, and it is filled with magic, or so the professor said. And she skipped around the lamp-post and ran full tilt into someone who was leaning against it, and her books went flying all over the place.
"Oh, I'm so sorry." Lindy was very startled.
"Hello, little girl,"
said a distinctly unusual voice. Lindy looked up. The stranger smiled and lifted his hat in greeting. "You dropped your books. Allow me." Lindy watched as the man bent from his waist and scooped up her books with an extraordinarily long arms. "Clumsy of me," he said. "I wasn't looking where I was going." The sound of his voice reminded her of wind whistling through long tunnels. "May I walk with you a little way and carry your books?" he asked. Lindy remembered her parents' warning never to speak with strangers.
"Well, you're Melinda Potter, aren't you?"
She was completely taken by surprise.
"Yes, I am."
"The professor is a good friend of mine."
"Oh, you mean Professor Savant?"
Lindy experienced a wave of relief.
"The very same. We have spent many pleasant evenings together. He talks of you so much."
The stranger pulled a golden yo-yo from his pocket and executed a quick trick with it. Lindy fell into step beside him as he began to walk. "How are things coming along with your trip to Whangdoodle Land?" he asked casually. Her jaw dropped.
"You know about that?"
"Oh, good heavens, yes! I've known about it for some time. The professor and I often chat about it."
"Oh!"
She was surprised that someone else knew of their plan. The golden yo-yo flashed in the sunlight and made a soft humming sound, and she glanced up at the odd-looking stranger. "I expect you'll be making a move before long," he said.
"To Whangdoodleland?"
"Yes."
Well, as a matter of fact, we're trying the Scrappy Caps this afternoon."
Scrappy Caps?" He looked startled.
"Oh, I should say Sympathetic Hats," Lindy said, and she smiled. "They are so very pretty."
She was fascinated by the whirling, bobbing yo-yo.
"They're going to make all the difference. It's supposed to be a wonderful adventure with the whole world. We'll be meeting a wiffle bird and seeing flutterbys and lots of other creatures."
"You really think you'll get there?"
"Oh, of course we will. The professor says we're nearly ready. It'll be any day now."
"I'm beginning to believe it." The stranger spoke in a grim voice, but Lindy was too enthusiastic to notice. She pulled him to a halt at the gate of her house.
"Oh, this is where I live. I'm afraid I have to go now."
"Well, we'll be seeing each other again, I'm sure." And he bowed and shook her hand. Lindy had an expression that she was holding a piece of wet seaweed. "Take care, little girl. I would hate to see anything happen to you."
I will. Goodbye."
Lindy took her books and walked to the front of her door and opened the door, and she turned around and waved politely, but to her surprise, her escort had vanished. The street was completely empty. Chapter 2. It was 4 o'clock when the children arrived at the professor's house.
"I met a friend of yours today,"
Lindy said. "A friend of mine?" The professor seemed preoccupied and a trifle nervous as he ushered the children into the garden.
"You know, this man, he's funny, he's really thin. He didn't tell me his name, but he said you were very good friends and that you spent many evenings together."
The professor stopped and looked sharply at Lindy and then said quietly, "Tell me exactly what he looked like."
"Oh, he was long and wobbly looking, kind of sharp at the elbows, and he had a funny voice, too."
"You said you met him this afternoon?"
"Yes, he was walking me home from school, and he knew all about Whangdoodleland and everything."
"Oh, good Lord," said the professor. "Oh, good Lord."
"What's the matter? Do you know him? Don't you know him?"
"I certainly do." And he seemed a little stunned and passed a hand across his brow. "Did you talk about the hats this afternoon? Did you tell him we were nearly ready?"
"Yes," she began, feeling a bit anxious. "Wasn't that all right? He said he was your friend."
The professor put a reassuring arm on her shoulders. "Do you realize that you were talking to the proc?"
What's the proc?"
"Oh, he's one of the most important creatures in Whangdoodleland. He's like the Prime Minister. Besides helping the Whangdoodle run the country, his job is to maintain the safety of the place. The oily proc, as he's sometimes called, does everything he can do to stop anyone from gaining entry and getting close to Whangdoodleland."
"But why did he come and talk to me?"
asked Lindy. "Oh, probably to find out about our trip. And since you are the youngest, Lindy, he knew you'd be the most unsuspecting. Oh, dear me, this puts a whole new complexion on things. We'd better have a talk." The professor led the way to the summer house, and the children sat down and waited for him to speak. He paced up and down for a while, and finally he turned to them face to face.
Okay, look, this is the situation. The Proc has found out that we are almost ready to leave for Whangdoodleland. He is a very clever fellow, and I have no doubt that he will do everything he can to stop us. I had hoped that we would be able to get a head start without him even knowing about it, but I underestimated him. Oh, so we have a big decision to make. Knowing that he is waiting for us, are we going to attempt our journey, or aren't we?
"Let's go anyway," Ben said instantly.
Me too,
Tom agreed.
I'm not afraid of a dumb old Proc,
Not even if he is a prime minister. The professor looked at Lindy.
How do you feel, darling?
She hesitated, and then asked in a small voice,
Can he hurt us?
The professor thought about it.
He can do a great deal to frighten us.
He didn't seem frightening when I met him,
Lindy reasoned.
Then let's go,
said Tom eagerly.
Come on, Lindy,
said Ben.
Look how brave you were at the Halloween.
Lindy clenched her hands tightly.
Okay, it would be a shame to waste all of our hard work.
And the professor smiled approvingly.
Then it is unanimous. There remains only one thing to be said. Stay close to me and do as I say. No matter what happens, you must obey me. Is that understood?
And all the children nodded.
All right, then. Put on your scrappy caps.
How come you're not wearing one, Professor?
asked Tom.
Oh, I have been studying Whangdoodleland for a long, long time, and after years of practice, I am able to go without my hat.
The professor helped Lindy tie her bonnet under her chin, and he placed the blue felt cap on Tom's head and straightened it. And Ben put on his headband, and the professor adjusted the tassel so it hung correctly.
Okay, now, I want you to remain seated and be very still. Do not be surprised if you feel just a little dizzy or if there is a buzzing in your head. The caps are very powerful, but they will not harm you.
The children did as they were told. Lindy felt light-headed. It was the feeling she had experienced before. She was acutely aware of the garden and the summer house and the professor standing close by. Tom was also excited that he gripped the sides of his chair until his knuckles showed white, and Ben tried to shut out the distraction and the thoughts that were threatening his concentration. He was trembling and hoped that he would not let the others down at this crucial moment. The professor spoke quietly.
Okay, I want you to relax. Be calm. Allow the power of the magic hats to flow into you. Listen to the sounds. Feel the fresh air. Look at the garden and imprint the scene on your memory. And very closely, I want you to close your eyes and remain aware of it all, just as we have always practiced.
The children had an odd sensation that the world was beginning to spin and tumble around them. The professor's voice continued,
Feeling your minds open and float. Remember what you are going. Shoot.
Gotta do that again. Go back. The children had an odd sensation that the world was beginning to spin and tumble around them. The professor's voice continued.
Feel your minds opening and floating. Remember where you are going. Reach out for it. Reach. It's there. right there. Open your eyes now and look. Look, dear children, and you will see that it is time we were on our way."
Ben, Lindy, and Tom became aware of the most incredible light. It surrounded them. It was dazzlingly bright, and for a moment it was hard to see anything at all. But as their eyes adjusted to the brilliance, they saw that the garden hedge in front of them was spinning around like a pinwheel at the 4th of July. There was the sound of a rushing wind, and they felt themselves being pulled forward as if by unseen hands. The professor was smiling and nodding his head and beckoning, "Come along, come along." Their vision gradually focused, and then, quite suddenly, everything became crystal clear. In front of them, the hedge had twisted into a long, mossy tunnel. The children knew that at the other end of it lay the most wonderful of all surprises.
"Come on!"
And Lindy got up from her chair and raced towards the opening. Tom yelled, "We did it! We did it!" And he leapt into the air with excitement and ran after his sister. Ben remained where he was for one uncertain moment. He was still dizzy, and he blinked as he tried to see the tunnel. The professor moved to take his hand. "Come along, Ben," he said gently. "We mustn't keep the others waiting." Lindy turned and cried out,
"Oh, Ben, come and look. Just come and see what I see."
Ben took a hesitant step forward and then gradually began to walk faster and faster until he broke into a run. He emerged from the tunnel a moment behind Tom and Lindy. It seemed that the world was full of flowers, brilliant flowers that were orange and blue and yellow and white. They were waving slowly like long stalks, like tall grass in the wind. There were shady trees and a river close by, making a soft singing sound as it flowed. But astonishingly, the trees were purple, and the river was golden, and the sky above was a bright, translucent red. There were pale pink mountains in the far distance, and high atop the tallest one was something that sparkled and shone like sunlight dancing on water. Lindy was tugging at the professor's sleeve.
"Look! Oh, look! Look! What is that? And what is that thing up there? That shining, lovely thing?"
"That is where the Whangdoodle lives."
The professor gazed on the mountain for a moment. He seemed overwhelmed.
"You mean that's the Whangdoodle's palace?"
Tom's voice rose with excitement, and the professor nodded.
"Can we go see right now? Can we go find him?" said Lindy.
"Oh, it isn't that easy. We will have many, many things to learn and overcome before we even reach that palace. Today is just the beginning."
"But we made it!" yelled Tom. "We're really, really here!"
"We did it!" said Ben in awe. "I never thought I could." "I am very proud of you," said the professor. "Shall we explore a little? Now just remember my warning. Stay close and do as I say."
He set off along a small path that led to a melodious golden river. Lindy walked beside him and took his hand, and the boys followed.
"Oh, the wiffle bird, she'll be along fairly soon," declared the professor. "She's insatiably curious, and she's bound to know we're here."
Lindy said,
"It's awfully quiet, though, isn't it? I mean, there aren't any birds singing or anything. All I can hear is the river."
"I noticed that too, Lindy. It is very unusual."
"And I smell fresh baked bread."
"Oh, it's the flowers."
"You're kidding. Can I pick one and see?
Oh, no, I wouldn't pick one, Lindy. It would only die, and Whangdoodle Land is a place for living things, but you can certainly smell the flowers.
Lindy bent down and put her face on a bright yellow bloom.
Oh my gosh, it does smell like baked bread. Do all the flowers smell like that?
Oh, you'll see.
Look, there's a signpost, said Tom, and he pointed to a post standing at the fork in the path. Its 4 arms were decorated with an elaborate sign. Ploy, Gambit, the stump, the river, Ben read out loud. Well, what does that mean?
Oh, there are some places that we will have to pass in order to reach the Whangdoodle, replied the professor.
And as they walked, the sound of the water grew louder. Soon the children were standing by the edge of the river.
Well, where does this go?
Asked Lindy.
I think it flows through the forest of the tree squeaks, but after that I don't know.
Tree squeaks?
Nasty little creatures. Ben, I hope we can avoid them.
Are they dangerous?
Lindy asked quickly.
Oh, I've never met them, Lindy, but I've heard they're terrible tattletales.
Tom said, So why does the river make that sweet singing noise?
Oh, if you think that's unusual, put your hand in the water and stir it around, said the professor.
Tom knelt to the river's edge and splashed with his hand. The movement made the river change its gentle tune into a series of thrilling, rippling sounds. The professor bent and picked up a stone.
Here, Lindy, throw this and see what happens.
She hurled that stone as far as she could, and it landed in the water with a splash, and chords of music rang in the air for several seconds.
That's incredible,
said Ben. I don't understand why that should even happen.
But why not? Said the professor. I told you not to even expect anything ordinary in Whangdoodle Land.
And he shielded his eyes.
Look, children, he cried excitedly. The wiffle bird is coming.
In the sky, in the distance, something was rolling and tumbling and soaring and dipping in a most peculiar manner.
The professor chuckled. Oh, she never could fly properly. I don't know how she manages it at all. She has so many feathers, you see. She's totally uncoordinated.
The children watched as the wiffle bird approached. Her long, fluffy feathers were being blown about in all different directions. It was impossible to see a head or a tail or even feet in the feathery profusion. The wiffle bird made a stumbling and very undignified landing onto a branch of a nearby tree and proceeded to shake and shuffle herself in some kind of order. It was not until she settled down that the children were able to see how truly beautiful she was. Her plumage was a brilliant rainbow of colors, red, pink, yellow, orange, and purple. She was a silky bird, rustling and smooth, and she gave out a delicate perfume that reminded the children of orange blossoms on a summer's evening.
Greetings, greetings, my dear wiffle bird, said the professor. It is a great pleasure to see you again. Won't you come down and join us? I would like to introduce you to some of my friends.
The bird jumped a foot in the air as he spoke, and every feather flew up and got tangled and had to be rearranged all over again. She retreated along the branch, making odd little humming sounds. The professor stepped forward.
You're looking very, very pretty. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen you look so lovely. Dear wiffle bird, sweet wiffle bird, won't you come down and say hello?
The wiffle bird gave a few startled squeaks and turned around and around in a branch. It was impossible for the children to tell which end of her was which. Quite suddenly, she leaned forward, or perhaps it was her backwards, and somersaulted out of the tree
and down to the ground and landed just in front of the professor. "Oh, that is very gracious of you," the professor said, kneeling beside her. "The children and I are so glad you came by." And he held out his hand to Lindy. "May I introduce Miss Melinda Potter?" Lindy knelt beside the professor.
Hello, Wiffle Bird. You are the prettiest thing I've ever seen.
The Wiffle Bird began her humming sounds again. "Oh, and these gentlemen are Benjamin and Thomas Potter." "How do you do?" Ben said courteously. Tom felt a trifle embarrassed and said in a gruff voice, "Hello, Bird." All of the children suddenly noticed that two tiny bird-like hands coming from her beautiful feathers, as if a curtain was holding one side of the hands, and it parted the waving plumage, and they saw two jet black beady eyes peering out. Lindy cried,
Oh, Professor, how sweet she is! I wish there were something I could give her. What does she like to eat?
"Oh, just feed her compliments, and she'll be perfectly happy." Tom said dryly, "In that case, she's probably full up already." The Wiffle Bird suddenly flew into the air and landed on Tom's shoulder, and it was taken completely by surprise. "Oh, here, get off," he said in a startling voice, and the professor grinned. "Oh, she likes you, Tom. That's a great, great compliment." Tom was embarrassed.
Listen, I like her too, but she's gotta get down.
He looked at the bird, now only inches away from his face. The tiny hands appeared again, and the button eyes stared at him without blinking. The professor and the children doubled up with their laughter. "Once she takes a fancy to someone, Tom, she never changes her mind. You're stuck with her, I'm afraid." And before Tom could protest further, a dreadful, dry, rattling sound came from somewhere across the fields of waving flowers. The Wiffle Bird stiffened and then flew into the air.
Mayday! Mayday! Mayday!
She shrieked in an incredibly shrill voice.
What does that mean?
Gasped Lindy. "Oh, Mayday is recognized as an international call for help. I fear we are in for a surprise." The horrible sound came again, but closer this time. "Tom, climb into the tree and tell me if you can see anything," commanded the professor. And the boy did as he was told. Well, we must conclude for tonight. Oh my goodness, what is going to happen? Why do you think the Wiffle Bird was crying Mayday? And what will Tom see when he climbs up in the tree? Well, tune in next time for our reading of the last of the Really Great Whangdoodles. I'm super excited about what's going to happen next. Until next time, goodbye.